My wife cheated on me with her boss, then stole $200, $0 in savings and property during our divorce, only to discover he's actually her real father and everything was an elaborate lie to hide the truth. Hello everyone. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Now, let's begin the video. Using a throwaway for obvious reasons with certain specifics modified to preserve anonymity. I never thought I'd be the guy to get blindsided like this. I mean, I always believed I had a pretty solid handle on my life, my marriage, and the people around me. But then came the day everything fell apart in a way I never saw coming. It all started with small things, little signs that, in hindsight, should have set me off, but I was too blind or maybe just too comfortable to notice. My wife, Jessica, had always been a bit high maintenance, but I figured that was just her personality. She's a fiery woman, bitchy at times, yes, but also charming enough that I thought I knew her inside out. We'd been married for 7 years, and for most of that time, I thought we had a decent life. She was ambitious, always climbing the corporate ladder, working her way up to a pretty important position at her company. I was proud of her, honestly. But then last year, things started to change. She became more secretive about her phone, always sneaking it away when I came near. She'd get defensive if I asked who she was texting or calling. She brushed it off with her usual sharp tongue, saying I was just paranoid or that I didn't trust her. That should have been a red flag, but I let it slide. Then came the late nights. Jessica would say she was working late at the office, but I'd catch her lying about her whereabouts. I'd find her phone records and see calls at odd hours, numbers I didn't recognize, or more often, numbers that belonged to her boss, a guy named Mark. I brushed it off as workplace gossip, but deep down I knew something was off. She was acting different, more dismissive, more aggressive when I asked about her work or her schedule. One night I decided to follow her. Not in a stalker way, just enough to see where she was going. That's when I saw her sneaking into a hotel downtown, apparently with Mark. My stomach sank. I saw them kiss through the window and I swear my heart stopped for a second. I wanted to confront her then, but I was too stunned. I just watched from a distance, trying to process what I was witnessing. I thought about all the years we'd been together, the promises, the plans for the future. And now I was watching her cheat on me with her boss, someone she claimed was just a mentor or a friend. But it was more than that. It was clear they were having an affair, and it tore me apart knowing I'd been blind to it all this time. The next day I found her phone lying on the kitchen counter. I didn't mean to snoop, but I couldn't resist. I looked through her messages, and that's when I saw it: flirty texts, explicit photos, and claims that she loved him. She was saying she couldn't wait to see him again, that she was tired of pretending everything was fine. My world crumbled in that moment. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. How could she lie to me for so long? How could she betray everything we built together? And what hurt even more was the realization that she'd been lying about her feelings, her fidelity, and her life. That's when I knew I had to confront her, but I also knew this was just the beginning of something much darker. When I finally sat her down that evening, I thought I was prepared for whatever she'd say. I'd seen enough to know she was lying, but I needed her to admit it. I wanted her to look me in the eye and tell me it was just a mistake, that it didn't mean anything. But Jessica, typical of her, was defensive from the start. She looked at me with that bitchy smirk she always had when she thought she could get away with something. "What are you talking about? You've got no proof," she snapped, crossing her arms. I pulled out my phone and showed her the messages, the hotel receipts, the photos. Her face twisted into a sneer, and she started to spin her web of lies. "Oh, come on, that's just work stuff. Mark and I are just friends. You're overreacting," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. She dismissed everything I showed her, calling it a misunderstanding or nothing serious. She even accused me of being paranoid, of reading into things that weren't there, but I knew better. I had seen what I saw. She then started to shift blame, turning the tables on me. "Maybe if you paid more attention to me, I wouldn't have to seek validation somewhere else," she spat. "You're busy with your job, your hobbies. You're never around. Maybe I needed someone who actually cares." That one hurt more than I expected. I was always trying to be a good husband, working hard, providing for us. And now she's telling me I don't care. I felt a storm brewing inside me: anger, betrayal, heartbreak. I wanted to yell, to scream, to destroy something. But I held back, just staring at her, feeling like I was drowning in a sea of lies. Then she threw in the final blow. "You're just jealous because Mark is successful and handsome, and I'm tired of pretending we're happy. I deserve better than your boring ass." That's when I realized she was just throwing everything she could at me, trying to turn me into the bad guy to justify her actions. But I wasn't buying it, not anymore. I told her to pack her bags, to leave, that I'd had enough. I told her I knew about the affair, about the lies, about everything, and that I wasn't going to be her fool anymore. That night I couldn't sleep. My mind was racing, replaying everything I'd seen and heard. I felt numb, broken, and furious all at once. How could she do this? How could she lie so effortlessly? I kept asking myself if I'd missed the signs, if I should have known sooner. The betrayal cut so deep it was like a physical wound, and I knew I'd need time to heal, or at least figure out what the hell to do next. Over the next few days, I started digging into her life more. I checked bank accounts, looked at property records, and found out that she'd squirreled away nearly $200, $0 in savings, money we'd been saving for a house, for our future. She transferred most of it into secret accounts, and I was furious. That money was supposed to be ours, and now it was gone, stolen right out from under me. She also had property, some jewelry, valuables that she'd taken during the divorce process. She was trying to hide everything, cover her tracks. I knew I had to get my hands on those records, on proof of her theft. But what shook me the most was the revelation that kept echoing in my mind. The man she'd been cheating with, Mark, was not just her boss. I found out from some old family records that Mark was actually her biological father. That's right, her real father. The entire affair wasn't just about infidelity. It was an elaborate lie to hide a terrible truth. Jessica had been hiding her past, her identity, and her true family history for years. All the lies, the betrayal, the theft, it all stemmed from this twisted reality she'd been running from. I couldn't believe it. The man she'd been sleeping with, the man she claimed was just her mentor, was her own father. That revelation hit me like a freight train, and I felt disgusted, sickened, and more betrayed than ever. It was as if everything I thought I knew about her, about us, was a lie. The person I loved, the woman I married, was hiding something monstrous, something I never could have imagined. Now I'm left with a mess I don't even know how to untangle. The affair, the theft, the lies about her past, all of it crashing down on me at once. I don't even know if I want to try to put it back together or if I should just walk away. But one thing's clear: I'm not the same man I was before. And I'm still trying to figure out how to deal with the fallout of discovering that, in the end, everything was a lie. After discovering the horrifying truth that Mark was actually Jessica's biological father, everything changed for me. It wasn't just about the affair anymore. It was about the foundation of my entire marriage crumbling under the weight of deception. I started to see everything differently. Every smile, every excuse, every lie she'd ever told. It was as if I had been living in a house built on quicksand, and now it was sinking fast. I spent days just staring at her old photos, her childhood memories, trying to piece together how she managed to hide something so huge for so long. The more I uncovered, the more I realized that her entire life had been a carefully constructed lie. She'd been hiding her real identity, her real family, her real past. All of it was a secret so dark that it explained her manipulative behavior, her bitchiness, her tendency to lie and twist the truth. She'd spent years covering her tracks, trying to keep her secrets safe, and I'd been completely oblivious. The money she stole, $200, zero in savings, was just the tip of the iceberg. I found bank statements, transfer records, and even some property deeds she'd forged or manipulated. She'd been planning her escape, her new life, for a long time. That money, those valuables, they weren't just for her. They were for her to run away, to disappear from the mess she created. I was furious. That money should have been ours, but she took it all, thinking she could cover her tracks and pretend everything was fine. I also uncovered that she'd been secretly buying property, jewelry, and luxury items. Hidden it all in her sister's name, in fake accounts, in offshore holdings. She thought she was clever, but I was already several steps ahead. I contacted a lawyer, started digging into her financial history and prepared myself for the worst. I knew I had to get justice, not just for the money she stole, but for the years of lies and betrayal. The more I learned, the colder I felt inside. I was angry, yes, but also deeply hurt. How could she lie to me for so long? How could she betray me, her own husband, and hide something so monstrous? I remember feeling sick every time I thought about her sleeping with her own father, about how she'd convinced herself that her actions were justified. I couldn't wrap my mind around it. All I knew was that I wanted to make her pay for what she did. One night I confronted her again. This time I was calm but deadly serious. I told her I knew everything: the affair, the theft, her real past. Her face twisted in anger and panic, but she kept denying everything, calling me paranoid, accusing me of trying to ruin her. She said she loved me, that she never meant to hurt me, that it was just a mistake. But I saw through her lies. I knew she was lying again. She always did. I told her I was done playing her game. I told her I was going to take everything: her money, her property, her freedom, and I was going to make sure she paid for the lies she told. I was going to expose her to everyone, to her family, to her colleagues. I wanted her to feel the same betrayal I felt, to understand what it was like to be completely blindsided by someone you trusted with your life. I wasn't planning to just walk away quietly. No, I wanted her to suffer, to realize what she'd lost. I wanted her to see that her lies had consequences, that her manipulations couldn't keep her safe forever. I started to compile evidence, take screenshots, gather everything I could find. I even hired a private investigator to dig into her past further: more secret accounts, hidden assets, and connections I never knew existed. Meanwhile, I was also dealing with the emotional fallout. I felt shattered, like my soul had been ripped out of my chest. I'd loved her, trusted her, built a life with her, and now I was faced with the brutal reality that she'd been using me all along. That she'd lied about everything: her feelings, her past, her identity. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and furious. I kept asking myself how I'd missed all these signs, how I'd been so blind. But even through all this chaos, I knew one thing: I couldn't stay with her anymore. The trust was gone, shattered beyond repair. I had to think about my future, about whether I could ever look at her the same way again. And honestly, I didn't know if I even wanted to try. All I knew was that I had to protect myself, that I had to make her face the consequences of her actions. So I made a decision. I was going to divorce her, take her to court, and fight for what was rightfully mine. I wasn't just after the money, though that was a big part of it. I wanted her to understand that you can't lie and cheat your way through life without paying a price. I wanted her to feel the weight of her deception. And I was ready for the fight, no matter how ugly it got. The day I finally decided to file for divorce, it felt like a weight had been lifted, but at the same time, I was bracing myself for the storm. I gathered all the evidence I had: screenshots of her lies, bank statements, property deeds, even the recordings I secretly made of her denying everything. I knew this wasn't just about ending the marriage. It was about making her accountable for everything she'd done. The process was brutal. Jessica, true to form, fought every step of the way. She called me names, accused me of trying to ruin her reputation, and tried to spin her lies again. She insisted that everything was a mistake, that she loved me, that she'd never meant to hurt me. But I wasn't buying it anymore. I had all the proof I needed, and I was determined to see her pay for her betrayal. During the divorce proceedings, I also uncovered more about her theft. She transferred that $200, $0 into a fake account and spent it on luxury trips, designer clothes, and a new car, all in her name. She thought she could hide everything, but I had the bank records to prove it. I also found out that she'd been planning to leave the country with some of her hidden assets, probably to start over somewhere new, far away from the mess she'd created. I made it clear to my lawyer that I wanted full custody of our assets and that I was prepared to fight her for every penny. I also demanded an audit of her financial records, her bank accounts, and her property holdings. My goal was to recover what she'd stolen, or at least get her to pay back what she took. I wanted justice, not just for me, but for the betrayal of everything we'd built. Meanwhile, Jessica was doing her best to manipulate the situation. She kept trying to guilt me, saying I didn't understand her, that she was a victim of her circumstances. She claimed she was sorry, that she loved me, and that she was willing to do anything to make things right. But I saw through her lies. I knew she was just trying to buy time, to spin her web of deception even tighter. One particularly explosive moment came when I confronted her with the evidence of her real past and her theft. She burst into tears, but her tears didn't seem genuine. Instead, they looked like a last-ditch effort to save her own skin. She begged me to drop the case, promised she'd make everything right if I just forgave her. But I wasn't falling for that. I told her that I'd already lost trust, that her lies had destroyed any chance of reconciliation. In the midst of all this chaos, I also reached out to some of her family members, people she'd kept in the dark about her true past. Turns out, her mother had died years ago, and Jessica had fabricated stories about her childhood to cover her real origins. The more I uncovered, the more I realized how deeply she'd been hiding her true self. It wasn't just an affair. It was a lifetime of secrets, lies, and manipulation. Throughout this process, I felt a mixture of relief and deep sadness. Relief that I was finally taking control of my life, that I was exposing her for what she really was. But sadness because I'd loved her once, and now I was watching my marriage die a slow, painful death. I kept asking myself if I could ever trust again, if I could ever look at someone the same way after everything I'd been through. In the end, I knew I had to protect myself. I had to put an end to her lies, her theft, and her manipulations. I'd fought hard to gather everything I needed, and I was ready to take her to court for full financial disclosure, for the return of the stolen money, and for custody of what was left of our shared life. I didn't want her to walk away scot-free, thinking she could cheat, steal, and lie her way out of everything. That's where I stand now. The divorce is in motion, and I'm trying to pick up the pieces. I don't know what the future holds, but I do know one thing. I'll never trust her again. And I'll make damn sure she pays the price for the lies, the betrayal, and the damage she inflicted. I've learned that sometimes the truth is stranger and uglier than fiction, and that revenge isn't just about money or punishment. It's about reclaiming your dignity after being shattered. The court hearings were a nightmare, but I knew I had to see this through. Jessica showed up, her usual bitchy attitude cloaked in fake tears and false remorse. She played the victim, claiming I was unfair, that I was trying to ruin her reputation. But I had the evidence, tons of it: her secret bank accounts, the property deeds in her sister's name, the stolen money. I handed everything over to my lawyer, confident that the truth would come out. The judge wasn't fooled by her act. When I presented the evidence of her theft, her affair, and her lies about her past, her face lost some of its color. She tried to deny it all, but her words sounded hollow. The bank statements, the transfer records, the recordings, they painted a clear picture. She had been manipulating everyone around her, including me, for years. The worst part was the custody battle. I wanted full custody of our shared assets, including the house we bought together, and I wanted her to be held responsible for the money she stole. Jessica argued that I was trying to punish her unfairly, that she was a good mother, that her past was irrelevant. But I knew better. I knew her manipulative streak, how she'd lie her way out of anything, and I couldn't trust her with our future. During the hearings, I also discovered some disturbing things about her family. Her mother had passed away when Jessica was young, and her biological father, had been a secret all along. Turns out, Jessica's entire life had been a web of lies she spun to hide her origins. She'd fabricated stories about her childhood, claiming she was raised by her grandmother, to cover up the truth that her father was someone she'd been sleeping with. That revelation made everything even more sickening. I remember feeling sick to my stomach when I learned that Mark, her boss and her supposed mentor, was actually her biological father. It explained her obsession with secrecy, her need to manipulate everyone around her, and her deep-rooted issues. It also explained her emotional instability, her bitchy attitude, and her tendency to lie and twist the truth. Everything made sense now: her lies, her theft, her affair, all of it part of a desperate attempt to hide her past. The judge finally ruled in my favor. I was awarded full custody of the assets, and Jessica was ordered to pay back the stolen money, plus interest. She was also ordered to relinquish her claim to the property and jewelry she'd hidden or transferred. The judge called her behavior deceptive and manipulative, which was an understatement. After the court, I felt a strange mix of relief and emptiness. I finally had some justice, but the pain of betrayal still lingered. I was devastated that the woman I loved had been lying to me for so long, that she'd stolen from us and hidden her true self. I spent weeks sorting through the aftermath, selling the house, dividing the assets, and making sure I got what was owed to me. It wasn't easy, but I was determined to rebuild my life from the wreckage. Jessica tried to reach out a few times, pleading for forgiveness, claiming she was sorry and that she'd change, but I saw through her. Her words were hollow, her tears fake. I knew she'd only continue to manipulate if I let her. I blocked her number, changed my locks, and cut all ties. I didn't want her to control or hurt me anymore. Looking back, I realize I learned a lot from this ordeal. Trust is fragile, and people can hide their true selves behind a mask for years. I also learned that revenge isn't about petty payback. It's about reclaiming your dignity, standing up for yourself, and making sure the truth comes out. Jessica's lies almost destroyed me, but I refused to let her win. Now I'm slowly trying to piece my life back together. I got a new job, started therapy, and focused on rebuilding my confidence. The scars are still there, but I refuse to let them define me. If there's one thing I want others to take away from this nightmare, it's this: never ignore the warning signs. If someone is hiding something, it will eventually come out, and when it does, you better be ready to fight for yourself. Because betrayal cuts deep, but with enough strength and clarity, you can survive and come out stronger. Now, sitting here reflecting on everything that's happened, I realize how much I underestimated the depth of betrayal. I thought I knew Jessica, thought I loved her enough to overlook her bitchy attitude, her lies, her manipulations. But it turns out, she was hiding a lifetime of secrets that I never could have imagined. The fact that her own father was her lover, that she'd been living a lie about her entire identity, that revelation was the worst blow of all. I learned that trust, once broken, isn't easy to rebuild. It's like trying to patch a sinking ship with duct tape. But I also learned something crucial. I am stronger than I thought. I survived her lies, her theft, her manipulation, and I came out the other side. The pain still lingers, but I refuse to let it define me. I've started to rebuild my life piece by piece, focusing on my own healing. One of the biggest lessons I've taken away is about honesty, about how vital it is to be vigilant and to listen to your instincts. If something feels off, it probably is. Don't ignore the warning signs, no matter how small or how much you love someone. Because betrayal can come from the most unexpected places, and it can destroy everything you thought was solid. I also learned that revenge isn't about returning the hurt, at least, not in a petty way. It's about standing up for yourself, making things right, and ensuring that the truth comes out. Justice might be slow, but when it finally arrives, it's worth every sleepless night and every tear. I hope everyone reading this understands that sometimes, the only way to truly heal is to face the brutal truth head-on and to fight for what's rightfully yours. As for Jessica, I hope she finally faces the consequences of her actions. I hope she's learned that hiding behind lies and manipulations only leads to destruction, not salvation. I hope she feels the weight of her choices, even if she never admits it. For me, I'm still healing. I've found new purpose, started trusting myself again, and I'm learning to forgive, not necessarily her, but myself for ever trusting her so blindly. The scars will stay, but they remind me of how far I've come. I know I'll never forget what happened, but I also know I won't let it define the rest of my life. In the end, betrayal taught me the importance of self-respect, of standing firm in the face of deception. I want anyone reading this to know that you don't have to accept lies, theft, or betrayal as the end of your story. You're stronger than the worst someone can throw at you. Keep fighting, keep believing in your own worth, And never let anyone make you feel small just because they're hiding something dark inside. That's the real lesson I'll carry with me forever.